It's hard to believe, but it has been nearly 2 weeks since Venezuela's devastating double earthquake, and the anger is as raw as the grief. The death toll has now risen to almost 3,000 people, over 16,000 injured, nearly 200 buildings completely collapsed, and families are still digging through rubble by hand because government excavators are sitting idle without fuel. Now, in a country that sits on the world's largest oil reserves, this is very frustrating for locals. 4 officials have already been arrested for looting valuables from the rubble. International rescue teams are beginning to withdraw, and survivors are describing a government that simply isn't there, like this one father who has been searching for his 3 daughters and his ex-wife.
We've been here, family by family. If you have a loved one here, God forbid, you come to look for them and rescue them, but there's no support from the government here. It's all been down to our own efforts.
Well, nearly 30,000 rescuers remain deployed, including 2,000 U.S. service members, but with almost 1,000 aftershocks recorded since June 24th and hope fading by the hour, the question tonight is who is actually running this rescue operation. And joining us now is Mariana Atencio. She's a Venezuelan reporter who has covered her home country for years. She knows the story deeply and personally. Mariana, thank you for being with us. You know, these stories, these images we're seeing of families digging with their bare hands while the government excavators sit empty without fuel. I can't imagine how frustrating that must be. What can you tell us about what is happening on the ground in Venezuela right now?
Natasha, the indignation, the frustration, and the anger toward this regime is growing by the minute. And I just want to remind your viewers that this is not a government. This is, in fact, a regime that isn't even constitutionally supposed to be managing this response or governing Venezuelans. Nobody voted for Delcy Rodriguez to be leading the country and to be leading this response. You have to understand that this is a failed state. We're talking about a regime that for over 20 years put us in a situation where our hospitals are crippled. There is no medicine. There are no firefighters. There are no rescue workers. If you get stopped by someone from the military or by a police officer, you fear them more than you fear actual robbers. That is the broken fabric that existed in Venezuela. And then you have to add 2 earthquakes of this magnitude. So this is a perfect storm, and it is brewing. People are desperate. Like we saw that interviewee that you showed on camera, still searching for their babies, for their neighbors with their bare, bloodied hands. And for a regime that sits on so much wealth, where they haven't even deployed all the tanks and troops that were the first to repress us whenever we wanted to march peacefully for democracy, it is a situation that is honestly something that I don't know if it'll be able to sustain itself for much longer. And I think it is important, as you mentioned, the American presence on the ground and the America's stake in Venezuela after January 3rd, that they recognize that this is not a regime that is apt to govern us after this crisis, and that we desperately need a transitional government to oversee this.
Right. So I want to talk about that a little bit, because obviously the downfall of Maduro, his removal from office by the United States, was something that was widely celebrated by Venezuelans across the globe, and also, of course, within Venezuela. But then he was very quickly replaced with Delcy Rodriguez, who was a part of his government. And for many, that was viewed as very little of a change that was actually made. So now, under Rodriguez, I guess, what is your expectation as to how we're going to see Venezuelans respond? You're saying there's a lot of anger with this, current regime. I guess that's what we're going to call it, right? And the question is, are we going to see people take to the streets or major protests, especially amid all of this damage and disaster that we're seeing?
So, Natasha, I marched peacefully in my country when I was a university student for years. My father died during the humanitarian crisis. He was there at every single protest. So we have been protesting for decades against these very people. Delcy Rodriguez wasn't even someone who was indirectly linked to Maduro. She was one of the 3 masterminds behind Maduro, one of the 3 power brokers, along with her brother, Jorge Rodriguez, and the Interior Minister, Diosdado Cabello. So these 3 people represent not only Maduro, but worse, We are immensely grateful to the United States for having removed Maduro, but they need to finish the job. And I understand initially keeping Delcy there because she does control the military, the institutions, and the oil reserves. Again, these people co-opted our country for 2 decades. You couldn't just remove them all. But given the scale of this humanitarian crisis, it is now time to turn towards a transitional government. Not only that, and it's what people have started asking for in the streets, including a former Venezuelan Supreme Court judge. Her constitutional mandate as a temporary figure to replace the president ended last Friday. Per our constitution, it's 180 days. So right now, she's not even legally supposed to be ruling our country,
Right.
save because she has the quote unquote, you know, protectorate of the United States. But I do think that what we're going to see in this phase in Venezuela in terms of hunger, desperation, lack of security, all of the people that have been left homeless, without jobs, all of the children that have now been displaced and separated from their families that are now orphaned could really lead to a perfect storm where we do see people take to the streets with anger and frustration at this regime. And I think that the Americans know that, and it's why they have 2,000
Right.
boots on the ground right now.
Right. And so I want to talk about, the role we could see the United States play in this. Obviously, there is an expectation, given the fact that the United States decided to intervene when it came to Maduro, that we would now see some type of intervention, given, this major disaster that has befallen the country of Venezuela. But what is the diplomatic dynamic? Is there somebody else that the United States would be willing to support that is not Delcy Rodriguez?
I think we need a transitional government from sectors of civil society that are experts for what we are facing now to take over Venezuela. We need a sort of junta like it has existed in our country in the past. Whenever we had a dictatorship in the 50s, when that dictator was removed from power, we had a junta of 3 people that managed to transition the government into democracy. The 3 phases that Secretary Rubio explained were the plan in Venezuela to get us back to transitional government, freeing the political prisoners, and a free and fair election is what we want to get back to. Right now, though, the urgency with which that is needed to be able to handle this response has grown tenfold. It's like the regularly scheduled programming cannot continue because people are still dying every day. And these people, the regime, have proven just completely incompetent and inept at responding to this situation, possibly making it worse and leading to a revolt from Venezuelans.
Yeah, well, I have to say it's just so disturbing to see these images. I think we're all, praying for the families that have been affected by this disaster. Very, very difficult to watch. Obviously, there's always hope that there's going to be some type of reparations, but at the end of the day, I don't know what you can even give back to these families after what they went through. And so the hope that there is that there's going to be some type of international intervention here to, perhaps provide some sort of hope for the future. I'd like to thank you, Mariana, so much for joining us. Really interesting to hear what you had to say.
Thank you so much, Natasha. And today is actually Venezuelan Independence Day. So on this day, more than ever, we have to raise our voices as Venezuelans and internationally. So thank you for your platform.
Thank you. Gracias.